Millionaire leaves vault open to test his maid. But what she did next left him speechless. Arthur Sterling lived in a fortress of silence and glass. His sprawling estate, nestled in the secluded hills of upstate New York, felt more like a museum of his past successes than a home. Since the death of his wife, Eleanor, in a boating accident 2 years prior, he had retreated from the world, managing his vast financial empire with a suspicion that bordered on paranoia. Every friendship, every partnership, every family tie was viewed through a lens of cynical skepticism. He had been burned before, by business partners, by friends, and most painfully, by his own nephew, a slick corporate lawyer named Marcus, who always seemed to be circling, waiting for an opportunity. The arrival of Clara was a necessity, not a choice. Hired through a high-end agency, her references were impeccable. She was efficient, discreet, and possessed a quiet composure that to Arthur was deeply unsettling. Calm people, he believed, either had nothing to lose or were hiding everything. The seed of doubt was planted during a rare family dinner, when Marcus, with his trademark smirk, commented casually, "Be careful with the new help, Uncle. The quiet ones are always the most observant. Honesty is sometimes just the opening move in a very long game." Arthur didn't reply, but the words resonated in his mind, mixing with the ghosts of past betrayals. He couldn't afford to be wrong again. The next morning, as he watched Clara set the breakfast table with a silent, meticulous precision, a dark idea began to take shape. He was not a man who dealt in maybes. If there was a flaw in her character, he would expose it, and the method he chose would forever alter the dynamics of his house. Arthur woke before dawn on Friday. The sky was a bruised purple, matching his mood. He skipped breakfast and went directly to his study on the second floor, a room paneled in dark mahogany that smelled of old leather and solitude. Using a combination known only to him, he opened the heavy steel door of his walk-in vault. Inside, shelves were lined with bearer bonds, property deeds, rare coins, and a collection of vintage watches that had belonged to his father. He stood there, staring into the vault, the air thick with the decision he had already made. His plan was methodical. He activated a small motion-triggered security camera hidden within a bookshelf, its lens aimed directly at the vault's entrance. The system fed a live stream to his tablet. Then, he made a show of leaving, informing Clara that he had an urgent, last-minute trip to Boston and wouldn't be back until late. He drove his Bentley for a few miles, parked it in a discreet location, and had a driver he kept on retainer for such occasions bring him back. He entered the estate through a service tunnel connecting the guest house to the main house, an access point no one else knew existed, and locked himself in a small, soundproofed study adjacent to his main office. From there, tablet in hand, he waited. Clara arrived at her usual time, punctual as a Swiss watch. She was a single mother, and her son Leo, a quiet boy of 7 with large, observant eyes, would spend his afternoons at a specialized after-school program. Arthur had seen him once or twice, a small, serious child who seemed to carry a world of thought behind his silent gaze. Clara began her work in the kitchen. The morning dragged on. Arthur watched, impatient. She cleaned the kitchen, organized the pantry, and then, around 10 o'clock, she came upstairs to clean the second floor. Arthur's heart hammered against his ribs when she pushed open the door to his study. The vault was there, wide open, a gaping mouth of steel, both an invitation and a threat. The morning light streamed through the window, glinting off the gold coins and polished watch faces. Clara stopped dead in the doorway, her cleaning caddy in hand. Her body went rigid. She set the caddy down and approached slowly, with the caution of someone approaching a dangerous animal. Arthur, motionless in the next room, held his breath. Clara knelt in front of the vault. Her eyes scanned the contents for a few long seconds. She didn't touch a thing. Not a single coin, not a single paper. She stood up, walked to Arthur's massive desk, opened the top drawer, and took out a notepad and a pen. She sat down in his leather chair, a throne no one else dared to occupy, and began to write with a steady, elegant hand. After a few moments, she stood, placed the note prominently on the center of the desk, and closed the drawer. Arthur stared at the screen, bewildered. Nothing was taken. Not a single object was even touched. The tablet trembled in his hand. She had written something. But what? Clara exited the study as quietly as she had entered. She picked up her caddy and continued cleaning the hallway, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The vault remained open. There was no haste in her movements, No furtive glances, no sign of guilt or fear, just a calculated, respectful, almost protective series of actions. Arthur waited for what felt like an eternity. When he was certain she was downstairs, he emerged from his hiding place. He walked into his study and went straight to the desk. He picked up the note. "Mr. Sterling, I found the vault open when I came in to clean. I have not touched anything. For your reference, should you require it, I have made a detailed inventory of the visible contents and their exact positions. Respectfully, Clara." He read it once, twice, a third time. The page was pristine. This was not the act of a thief. It was the act of a guardian. He sank into his armchair, his body heavy, and stared at the open vault, unable to process what he was feeling. Part of him was relieved, another profoundly ashamed. In that silence, Arthur Sterling realized he had tested the wrong woman. Or perhaps, for the first time in years, he was in the presence of someone with absolutely nothing to hide. But he wasn't ready to accept that yet, not without understanding who Clara really was. The image of Clara kneeling before the open vault, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos of his own suspicions, haunted Arthur for the rest of the weekend. He reread her note until the ink seemed to blur, but the impression of the gesture remained sharp and clear. Her reaction, so objective, so clean, had disarmed him in a way he couldn't explain. Arthur was a master at detecting hidden motives, at reading the subtle tells in every smile and handshake. The problem was, there was nothing to read in Clara's actions. There was no hesitation, no fear, no vanity, just the simple direct act of someone refusing to allow their integrity to be questioned. And yet, a part of him resisted. The cynicism he had cultivated for years was a fortress not easily breached. What Clara did, while seemingly exemplary, could still be the opening move in a more sophisticated game. She knew the open vault was a risk, knew she could be under observation. A clever thief wouldn't act impulsively. They would act exactly as she had, with caution, building the target's trust for a later, more significant strike. His nephew Marcus's words echoed. Honesty is sometimes just the opening move. Arthur knew he had to dig deeper. A single gesture was not enough proof. He needed to see who Clara was outside the walls of his estate, when she believed no one was watching. On Monday, Arthur executed the second phase of his plan. He feigned another business trip, this time to Chicago. He left early, carrying a briefcase. Before leaving, he approached Clara in the kitchen. "Clara," he said, his tone carefully neutral, "I've had to leave in a hurry. I need you to handle a small task for me. My usual charity donation is due. It's a small, local children's art program I support. Could you please take this cash?" He handed her a thick envelope. "And deliver it to their office in town. Just get a receipt." The amount in the envelope was $5,000, double the actual donation amount. The charity was real, but the office was a simple drop box. There would be no one to count the money in front of her. The test was simple. Would she deliver the full amount, or would the extra cash prove too tempting? He didn't go to the airport. He drove to a nearby town, swapped his luxury car for an unremarkable rental, and changed into casual clothes. He positioned himself in a coffee shop across the street from the small building that housed the charity's administrative office. From there, he had a clear view. He waited, a knot of tension tightening in his stomach. He found himself in the strange position of hoping to be proven wrong, of wanting this woman to be exactly who she appeared to be. Around 11 o'clock, he saw her. Clara arrived on a public bus. She was alone, as her son Leo was at school. She walked with a quiet purpose, holding the envelope securely. She entered the building, and Arthur's eyes were glued to the door. She was inside for less than 5 minutes. When she emerged, she was no longer holding the envelope. She checked her watch, and then, instead of heading back to the bus stop, she walked in the opposite direction. Arthur's suspicion flared. Where was she going? He quickly paid for his coffee and followed at a discreet distance. She walked 3 blocks to a different part of town, an area with older, more modest buildings. She entered a small, unassuming community center. Arthur waited outside, his mind racing with possibilities. Was this a secret meeting? Was she involved in something illicit? After 20 minutes, he couldn't stand the suspense. He walked in. The center was quiet, with a few seniors playing cards in one room. A sign on a door read, "Community Support Services." He saw Clara at a desk, speaking in low tones with a social worker. On the desk between them was a stack of papers and a small, worn-out wallet. Clara was pointing to a line on a form, her expression serious and focused. She wasn't making a deal, she was filling out paperwork. He retreated outside, confused. He waited another 10 minutes until she came out. She looked tired, but her shoulders were straight. She walked directly to the bus stop and headed back towards his estate. Arthur returned to his car, a storm of thoughts raging in his head. Her actions didn't fit any of his cynical narratives. When he arrived home that evening, he found the house immaculate. On his desk in the study, there was a small sealed envelope. He opened it. Inside was the official receipt from the children's art program for a $5,000 cash donation, and underneath it, a second, smaller receipt from a local office supply store for a pack of high-quality drawing paper and a set of colored pencils, totaling $25. Tucked into the fold of the receipt was a $5 bill and some change. A handwritten note was attached. Mr. Sterling, the donation was made as requested. I took the liberty of using the remaining funds from my weekly grocery allowance to purchase some art supplies for Leo's after-school program, as they were running low. The change is enclosed. I hope this was acceptable. Clara. He stared at the note, the receipts, the small amount of change. She hadn't just passed his test, she had transcended it. She hadn't pocketed the extra money. She hadn't even kept it. She had used her own money to buy supplies for other children. He thought of the scene at the community center, the worn-out wallet, the paperwork. This wasn't a woman playing a long game for his fortune. This was a woman fighting a quiet, daily battle for her own survival and her son's well-being, and doing so with a level of integrity he had never encountered. He felt a profound sense of shame. He had been so busy looking for a monster that he had failed to see the quiet hero standing right in front of him. He still didn't know her whole story, but he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that his tests were over. The real test, he now understood, was for him. Arthur woke up the next morning feeling a shift within himself. The rigid walls of his cynicism, built over years of betrayal, had begun to crack. The image of Clara at the community center, her quiet dignity in the face of unseen struggles, had done more to disarm him than any business negotiation ever had. He was accustomed to a world of grand gestures and hidden agendas. Clara's world, he was beginning to realize, was one of small, silent actions that carried immense weight. He found himself observing her not with suspicion, but with a burgeoning, unfamiliar sense of respect. He still didn't understand her. Her quiet resilience was a language he had forgotten how to speak. He saw her with her son, Leo, in the afternoons before she left. He watched from his study window as she would sit with him in the garden, not speaking much, but communicating through touch, through shared drawings, through a bond that was palpable even from a distance. He saw the way Leo, a boy who seemed so contained, would light up in her presence. It was a world of quiet strength that both fascinated and intimidated him. It was Marcus who shattered this fragile new perspective. He appeared unannounced on Wednesday evening, striding into the house with a bottle of expensive scotch and the easy confidence of a man who believes he owns every room he enters. Arthur received him coolly, but Marcus was oblivious, launching into a monologue about a recent corporate acquisition. They sat in the study, the same room where Arthur had watched Clara on his tablet just days before. "So, how's the new help working out?" Marcus asked, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Still as quiet as a church mouse?" "She's efficient," Arthur replied, his voice flat. Marcus chuckled, a low, condescending sound. "Efficient, yes, I'm sure she is. You know, I did a little digging. Just a standard background check, for your own protection, of course." Arthur's body tensed. "You did what?" "Relax, Uncle. It's what I do, and I found something interesting." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Our quiet Clara has a bit of a past. A few years ago, she was a witness in a nasty embezzlement case at her previous job. A mid-level manager was stealing from the company. Clara was the one who reported him. The guy went to jail." Arthur stared at him, unsure where this was going. "That sounds like she did the right thing." "Oh, absolutely," Marcus said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "A real model citizen. But here's the kicker. The manager claimed he was set up, that Clara was the one manipulating the books and that she framed him when he got too close to discovering it. Of course, no one believed him. He was the one with the gambling debts. But it makes you think, doesn't it? A woman who knows her way around ledgers, who knows how to play the victim, who knows how to point the finger at someone else." He took a sip of his scotch, his eyes gleaming. "She's not just some simple cleaning woman, Uncle. She's smart, maybe too smart. And now she's here, in your house with access to everything. The poison of doubt, which had just begun to recede, flooded back into Arthur's system, colder and more potent than before. The story fit perfectly into the cynical narrative he was so comfortable with. The quiet integrity, the meticulous notes, the charity donation. Could it all be a performance? The act of a woman who was an expert at appearing virtuous? He felt a surge of anger, not just at Clara, but at himself for almost letting his guard down. "She's never asked for anything," Arthur said, his voice tight. "The best players never do," Marcus retorted smoothly. "They wait. They make you feel safe. They make you feel like you're the one in control. And then, when you least expect it, they make their move. All I'm saying is, be careful. A woman like that, with a son to support, people do desperate things." After Marcus left, the silence of the house felt suffocating. Arthur paced his study, the scotch untouched on his desk. He was torn. His instincts, honed by years of experience with sharks like Marcus, told him that his nephew was the one playing a game, trying to isolate him, to keep him suspicious of outsiders. But the story Marcus told was plausible. It fed into his deepest fears. He needed to know the truth, once and for all. The next day, he did something he hadn't done in years. He made a call to a private investigator he used to employ, a man named Peterson, who was discreet and thorough. "I need you to look into someone for me," Arthur said, his voice low. "Her name is Clara. I want to know everything about the embezzlement case she was involved in. Everything." While he waited for the report, Arthur found himself unable to look at Clara. He avoided the kitchen, took his meals in his study, and watched her on the security cameras, his mind a battlefield of conflicting thoughts. He saw her helping Leo with his homework, her patience seemingly infinite. He saw her carefully tending to his late wife's rose garden, a space no one else was allowed to touch. He saw her find a wallet one of the gardeners had dropped, and saw her track the man down to return it, refusing the reward he offered. Every action was a testament to her character. And yet, Marcus's words echoed in his mind. She knows how to play the victim. 2 days later, Peterson's report arrived in a sealed envelope. Arthur locked his study door and opened it with trembling hands. It was a comprehensive file. It detailed the embezzlement case, including court transcripts and witness statements. The manager had indeed accused Clara of framing him, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. He had been caught on camera, and the digital trail led directly to his computer. But that wasn't what made Arthur's blood run cold. It was the section at the end of the report. Peterson had dug deeper. The manager who went to jail had a cousin, a lawyer who had tried to pressure other employees to change their stories. A lawyer who had anonymously tipped off the press to smear Clara's name during the investigation. A lawyer who, Peterson noted, had recently done legal work for a firm that managed some of Arthur's offshore accounts. The lawyer's name was Marcus. It all clicked into place. Marcus hadn't just found this story. He had been a part of it. He had a pre-existing animosity towards Clara because she had been responsible for his cousin's downfall. His visit, the warning, it wasn't about protecting Arthur. It was a calculated move to get rid of Clara, to remove a person of proven integrity from the house and keep his uncle isolated and dependent on his counsel. He had used Arthur's own paranoia as a weapon against him. The realization hit Arthur with the force of a physical blow. He had been played, not by the quiet woman cleaning his house, but by his own flesh and blood. The silence in Arthur's study was no longer one of suspicion, but of cold, hard clarity. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, revealing a picture not of Clara's deceit, but of his nephew's deep-seated manipulation. Marcus hadn't been warning him. He had been planting poison, using a past event to try and oust the one person in the house whose integrity might threaten his own influence. Arthur felt a profound, chilling shame. He had subjected Clara to his silent, cynical tests, all while the real threat was smiling at him over a glass of scotch. He spent the rest of the day in a state of quiet contemplation. He watched Clara on the cameras, but his perspective had irrevocably shifted. He no longer saw a potential threat. He saw a woman of extraordinary resilience. He saw a single mother who had stood up for what was right, even when it made her a target. He saw her quiet, unwavering dedication to her son and the gentle care she took with his late wife's home. He realized that for 2 years, his house had been a sterile monument to his grief. In just a few short weeks, Clara and Leo had, without even trying, begun to breathe life back into its empty rooms. That evening, He did something he hadn't done since Eleanor died. He went down to the kitchen as Clara was preparing to leave. She looked up, surprised, as he entered. Leo was sitting at the small kitchen table, meticulously coloring in a drawing. "Clara," Arthur began, his voice softer than he intended. "I need to speak with you." She straightened up, her expression neutral but attentive. "Yes, Mr. Sterling?" He gestured towards the chairs. "Please, sit." He sat down opposite her, the small table feeling like a vast expanse. He didn't know where to begin. An apology felt inadequate. He decided on the truth. "I know about the embezzlement case at your previous job," he said quietly. Clara's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. A flicker of old pain crossed her face before she masked it with her usual composure. "I see," she said, her voice even. "I also know," Arthur continued, looking her directly in the eye, "that my nephew, Marcus, was involved, that he tried to discredit you to protect his cousin." The mask on Clara's face finally broke. Her eyes widened in genuine shock. She had clearly known about the manager's accusations, but she had no idea the connection ran so deep, right into the heart of her new life. I didn't know," she whispered. "He came to me," Arthur confessed, the words tasting like ash. "He used that story to make me doubt you, and I, in my foolishness, allowed it. I subjected you to tests, Clara. The open vault, the charity money. I watched you, and I judged you, all because I have forgotten how to trust." Leo, sensing the shift in the room's emotional climate, stopped coloring and looked from his mother to Arthur, his large eyes full of a child's simple wisdom. Clara was silent for a long moment, processing his confession. When she finally spoke, there was no anger in her voice, only a profound, weary sadness. "Mr. Sterling," she said softly, "I have been doubted my whole life. I don't need you to trust me. I just need you to be fair. I came here to work, to provide a safe life for my son. That is all." "It's more than that," Arthur said, a new conviction in his voice. "What you've done here, you've brought a sense of order, of peace, that has been missing for a very long time." He looked at Leo, who was now shyly pushing his drawing across the table towards him. It was a picture of a large house with a smiling sun overhead. "You and Leo, you've made this place feel less like a house and more like a home." He slid a simple sealed envelope across the table. "This isn't a test," he said quickly. "It's an offer. I've spoken with the administrators of a top private school in the area, one with an excellent special needs program. They have an opening for Leo. This covers his tuition for the next 5 years. And this," he slid a second, thicker envelope over, "is a contract, not for an employee, but for an estate manager. A permanent live-in position, with a salary that reflects the value you bring to this home. There's a small cottage on the property. It's yours, if you want it." Clara stared at the envelopes, her eyes welling with tears she refused to let fall. She looked at her son, then back at Arthur. For the first time, he saw not just a resilient woman, but a tired one, a mother who had been fighting battles alone for too long. She didn't give him an answer right away. She simply nodded, a gesture of understanding that was more powerful than words. The next morning, Arthur formally severed all business and personal ties with Marcus, his letter curt and final. He didn't need to explain why. Marcus knew. A week later, Clara and Leo moved into the cottage. The main house, once a fortress of solitude, began to change. The sound of a child's laughter sometimes echoed in the garden. The smell of home-cooked meals replaced the sterile air. Arthur started taking his meals in the dining room again. He found himself looking forward to his brief, quiet conversations with Clara, and to the simple, trusting way Leo would show him his latest drawing. One afternoon, he found them in the rose garden. Leo was gently touching the petals of a large white rose, his face a picture of wonder. Clara was watching him, a soft smile on her lips. She looked up as Arthur approached. "Eleanor loved these roses," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She would be happy to see you both here." Clara simply nodded, her eyes conveying everything that didn't need to be said. In that shared, silent moment, Arthur Sterling finally understood. The greatest treasures weren't locked away in a vault. They were in the quiet courage of a good woman, in the trusting smile of a child, and in the profound healing power of letting someone in. The test had ended, and in the process, he had found something far more valuable than anything he had ever owned. He set a trap to expose a thief, but instead, he uncovered his own brokenness. Clara's quiet dignity was the mirror he never knew he needed. She wasn't the one being tested. He was. Do you know someone with this kind of silent strength? Share this story with them and subscribe for more tales of the human heart.